So again, my name is Lee Hayes Byron. I'm the Director of IFAS Extension and Sustainability, and we're really glad you could join us today. Our topic is Drawdown. We're going to look at climate change from the science, so everyone's on the same page, and then we're going to jump right into the solutions part, because that is really what gets people motivated and helps us look to a hopeful future on this topic. I asked in the chat box where you all are joining us from. And it looks like we have some from Bradenton, some from Sarasota, some from Port Charlotte. So again, that's one of the benefits of these virtual settings is people can join us from many locations. People are joining from an interest in climate change solutions as well as a public health issue. That's really good to hear. And and someone took the lifelong learning class with Jack Merriam, which was based on Drawdown. So you actually are going to get most of my quiz questions right, I bet. I'm glad to see that. Please share your knowledge as we go. Another one shared that Drawdown is important for the organization Florida Veterans for Common Sense, and really interested in other parts of Paul Hawkins' work. So we'll dig into that a little bit. Someone's joining from New York City. We're glad to have you. We do have a little bit of a Florida perspective in this. We're here in Sarasota on the West Coast, but we're glad to have you and often have sort of national and sometimes international audiences in our webinars as well. So welcome. And someone else is joining from Venice and bought the book but haven't read it yet. So hopefully I will convince you to take the time to read the book, or at least focus in on the areas that seem of most interest to you after this presentation. So let's jump right in. Like I said, we're going to start with the science because there is a good amount of misinformation out there on the science of climate change, and we're going to tackle them head on. This is a presentation that the Science Environment Council of Southwest Florida developed. Dr. Jennifer Schaefer worked with me on giving this as a tag team, and she's given me permission to use her presentation as this introduction to the science. And then I will jump into the presentation that I traditionally give in that tag team that's focused on Drawdown. So first, there are many myths out there related to climate change. And the first one is that it's a hoax. So let's just tackle it. Let's see what we can share so that you are empowered to have these conversations with others as well. So what do we know about how our climate is changing? All of these are impacts not that are projected, but that actually have been seen already. We are seeing increasing temperatures. We're seeing certainly more wildfires. That was true this year and last year. We're seeing changes in ice melt, as well as rising sea levels, coral impacts, stronger storms. All of these things were predicted in the past and have been actually seen across both the United States and the world. So we do know it's happening. We know it's happening now. These are not meant for you to dig into the details, but just to see the trends. So these are 10 different data sets looked at globally that give you the idea of the time from 1850 until current. And you can see that all the ones that have to do with temperature are going up very clearly. This is land temperature, sea temperature. And then this one is sea level, which is certainly a relation to the temperature. And then anything to do with snow or ice is going down. So this is snow cover, Arctic sea ice extent, all of those. So you can see that all of these long-term trends are heading in the directions that confirm that those impacts are being seen. This is the latest reading from the Mauna Loa Observatory in Hawaii that looks at carbon dioxide concentrations on a daily basis. So you can go to this website and see it every day. And they found 411 parts per million of carbon dioxide on November 2nd. And it is looking at the Mauna Loa data after 1958 and ice core data. So carbon dioxide from the bubbles that they take from ice core readings back beyond there. So this part is historical from ice core, and from 1958, it's actual measurements from Mauna Loa Observatory. So those are some of the measurements we're seeing in carbon dioxide and in ice melt and all of those things. So what do Americans think about what they're seeing? This is a trend from 2008 to 2019 of Americans' views on the evidence of climate change. So what do they think? Is there solid evidence or is there not? And 71% of Americans see solid evidence. And that's been pretty consistent in the over the last year or two. And it's back up to the peak that it was back in 2008. So the American confidence that there is evidence of climate change is very strong. Okay, so maybe it's not a hoax, but one of the other myths is that it's happening, but it's not because of us. It's not because of human action. So let's look at some of the evidence on that. This is a study that looked at the observed global temperature change over time, over the last century, and then modeled that looking at only natural factors, which is sometimes what people might say. It's just natural influences, it's not humans. So they looked at what those trends would look like with natural factors only, and then they looked at it including both natural and human factors. And you can see that that second combined effort is the only one that matches the actual observations over the last century. Humans are absolutely largely responsible. So in what ways are humans responsible? About a third of the impacts are coming from changes in land use. So human activities like changes in land cover, deforestation from urbanization and large-scale agriculture. About 2/3 from increased emissions of atmospheric greenhouse gases from methane, which can come from livestock and landfills, as well as from carbon dioxide from burning fossil fuels, which absorb and retain heat. So power plants and transportation. So how do we know that all that extra carbon dioxide is not just from natural sources? There are actually ways that you can determine the source of the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. There are chemical signatures, and they have been able to find that chemical signature and attach it to the burning of fossil fuels. So how does it break down in the United States? This is the breakdown of greenhouse gas emissions by sector. And this is with electricity distributed by the sector that's using it. Sometimes electricity is pulled out as its own piece of the pie, but to me, it makes more sense to see it distributed by who's actually using it. So in the United States, we're about a third transportation, a third industry, and a third residential and commercial, the buildings that are residential, commercial. And 1/10, 10% is from agriculture. This is a new image I was able to get from Drawdown that breaks it out globally. And there you can see that it's a little bit different categories, about 25% from electricity production, 24% from food, agriculture, land use, 21% from industry, only 14% from transportation, 6% from buildings, and 10% from other energy-related emissions. But what's interesting is you look on the other side of this graph and you see where all of those emissions are going. 24% of them are being absorbed by sinks within the landscape, by the trees, and then about 17% are being absorbed from the ocean, coastal and ocean sinks. But 60% of those are remaining in the atmosphere, and that's creating that blanket of the heat trapping gases. So another of the myths is, so climate change has changed before, why does it matter? You know, but no matter who's causing it, why does it matter? Yeah, it has absolutely changed over time, and this gets you in thousands of years before present, so much further back than the other graphs have looked, back 400,000 years. And you can see that sea levels have gone up and down throughout time. Carbon dioxide concentrations have gone up and down throughout time. But if you look at the far right of that CO2 concentration graph, you see it is off the charts. Literally, it is into the next temperature graph. And so the CO2 concentrations are much higher than they've been historically. And we expect that the sea levels and the temperatures will be catching up with that. This gives you a sense of what Florida looked like over time. That interglacial coastline was much smaller. The glacial coastline was much larger. We are currently in the shape we're used to, but things really are expected to change over time. Here in Sarasota County, our closest tide gauge historically is in St. Petersburg. And you can see the monthly mean sea level in that St. Pete tide gauge since it was installed in 1947. And it absolutely is an upward trend, but it's also an accelerating trend. They're seeing that increase in the rate of sea level rise increase. We've seen about an inch of sea level rise per decade and 7.8 inches in St. Pete since 1946. But what's going to happen going forward? I mentioned that increasing rate. These are the projections for that St. Petersburg, Florida tide gauge, depending on what happens with emissions. So, and also what happens with some feedbacks that are modeled in these projections. So if we can really keep emissions low, they might be that lower line, but given what the trend that we're on currently, it is more likely to be that one of those top two lines or somewhere in between. This is actually a picture from Siesta Key a few years ago during a king tide event. This is not during a storm. This is not after a rain. This is a king tide. This is just a very high tide throughout in that year. And they took pictures of their docks underwater just resulting from that king tide event. This is a picture from Longboat Key, also within our region. And again, this is water coming in from the bay, not precipitation, not the result of precipitation. I was on a tour where we took this picture, and on the other side is the bay. You can actually see the bay from this area, and the water moved when a boat went by because the wake from the boat came in through the stormwater pipe and moved the water that was actually salt water on the road. So what does that mean for the future? Those projections for sea level rise are also going to have impacts on how frequently those kinds of high tide flooding events happen. This is a projection of how often they are currently happening in St. Pete. And then depending on the emissions that we emit into the future, we may have the frequency in blue of high tide events, or we may have them in red. So it really does make a difference which track we take. This is another study that was done by the Union of Concerned Scientists on the number of homes at risk of chronic inundation by 2100. And this one is looking at a moderate sea level rise, so that sort of medium level of the projections. And you can see that different areas of our region are going to expect different numbers of homes to be impacted. But these are in the tens of thousands, so this is not a small number of people impacted. And one of the things that I think isn't talked about nearly enough, and someone mentioned in their comment about public health, is the number of heat days. So I actually grew up in Sarasota County, and people would wonder how I could live in such a hot place in Florida, and it actually wasn't that hot growing up. But the frequency of days over 95 degrees and really over 105 is where those changes are going to start to be impacted. So historically, our area had 5 days per year over 105 degrees Fahrenheit. And if we take slow action to reduce emissions, by late century, they expect that to be 77 days over 105 degrees. And that really can have impacts on public health, particularly for our vulnerable and our senior communities. So I'm going to come back to the social science for just a minute. What do Floridians think about climate change, and how concerned are they? This is, again, the last 5 years of a study that's been done by St. Leo University. And it has started to come back up in 2020. We're at now almost 76% are very and somewhat concerned about climate change here in Florida. So the last of the myths is, maybe someone might give in to those last 3 myths. Maybe it's happening, maybe it is humans' responsibility, maybe it is kind of a big deal, but some people might say, oh, but it's too complicated. It's too big of an issue for me to do anything about. That's the one we really want to tackle today for the rest of this presentation. Many of you may have seen this cartoon that talks about if this is a big hoax and we take action, what happens if we just create a better world? Like, isn't that a reason enough to do some of these things in addition to climate change? Because the co-benefits, we call them, the other things that will improve as a result of the climate change actions are actually really good for our communities. So we would be certainly happy to preserve rainforests, to create green jobs, to create more livable cities, to have healthier children and seniors. So all of these things are good, no matter why we're doing them. So let's dig into Drawdown as the way that we do this. But before I do that, let me take a look at if there are any questions in the chat box. I don't see any currently, but please feel free as we go to add any questions in there, and I will stop as we go. So I will move on to hopefully a little bit more hopeful approach to this. So Drawdown is this book that I think you can see. Nope, you can't because of my background. I apologize, but the image is there on the front. Mine is well loved and lots of dog ears there. I see someone else has theirs right by hand, so you can flip through it as we go. Drawdown is a book that Paul Hawken decided to bring together scientists from around the world to do peer-reviewed analysis of the full spectrum of climate solutions to determine what exactly it would take to, in the next 30 years, to bring global emissions to a point where we actually start reversing climate change, not just stop it, but actually reverse it to a point where we can have a more stable climate. They have 70 research fellows from 22 countries that came together to write this book. They narrowed down the list of solutions to those that had the greatest potential to reduce emissions or sequester carbon, but they didn't want the solutions that were promising or on the horizon. They want the ones that were available now that could be implemented with the right policies and collective efforts. They did literature reviews, they developed climate and financial models, and they submitted their work to outside experts and a 120-person advisory committee. So the results of this are a compilation of the top 100 solutions ranked by their potential for global carbon reduction within the next 30 years. So those are the terms that we're talking about, the top 100 that can achieve global carbon reduction in the next 30 years. This can be done in our lifetimes. Nearly all of these have quantified estimates of costs and benefits, as well as full discussions of the less tangible benefits, those co-benefits that I talked about: security, health, poverty alleviation, other environmental improvements that are related. So today, I want to be inspired as a group about what's possible by a set of solutions that touch every sector. And probably your individual passion or your area of expertise is in here somewhere. So we try to travel with Paul Hawken on this journey that harnesses creativity, compassion, and commitment. And it ends up with a world that's far better off. So I try to do this in a fun way. It's a really dense information in this book. So we try to do it in a fun way. So we're going to do it in the form of a quiz. There is no judgment in this quiz, but it's just a fun way to think about the relative benefits of the various solutions in the book. So we're going to work our way through the most interesting and locally relevant solutions to determine which ones have the greatest potential impact. I'm going to challenge some assumptions, hopefully, and surprise or inspire you. But those of you who have studied this in detail probably already know a lot of these answers, so don't give them away. Everything in the book is an impactful solution. So just because something is not as high as one of those other relative benefits, all of these top 100s are tools in our climate solutions toolbox. So don't dismiss those that ranked lower. It's just really interesting to see the relative potential. And then I certainly would encourage you to look at their website, which is drawdown.org, and to read the book, which is available through our library system if you don't already have it. So let's get started. All right, so Sophia is going to help me with some polling questions. So this first one is an easy introduction. We're going to look at, of the 100 solutions proposed in Drawdown, which had the greatest potential global impact. So was it restoring tropical forests, solar farms at a utility scale, managing chemical refrigerants, or organic and regenerative agriculture? So go ahead and put your answers in the polling question that Sophia has put up. These are just guesses. And like I said, really there are no wrong answers because they're all good solutions, but I'm gonna tell you which one actually ended up first. Okay, Sophia, I think you probably can end the polling. All right, so managed refrigerants came out first. I think we have some informed attendees. And indeed, the answer is managing refrigerants. This is often one of the biggest surprises in the whole book for a lot of people. In 2016, world leaders agreed to what's called the Kigali Accord, which phased out hydrofluorocarbons, or HFCs, by 2019 in high-income countries and by 2028 in low-income countries. And that was a huge accomplishment. The analysis in this Drawdown book assumes that phase out from the Kigali Accord actually occurs in new equipment, but it also then looks at existing refrigerants in existing air conditioners and refrigerators currently in use. So that's not covered by the Kigali Accord. So they do look at what how we can properly dispose of all the refrigerants that are out there, as well as to transition new technology to not be using these refrigerants that are impactful to the climate. It set a goal of containing 87% of refrigerants within the next 30 years. It has a huge climate impact, but it is one of the few solutions in the book that actually has a net cost rather than a financial benefit. It will be hard, but it's clearly important. So people often ask, like, what can I do in this weird sort of technical solution? And we recommend that if you're getting your air conditioning serviced, that you make sure to ask your HVAC technicians how they're going to ensure that the refrigerants don't escape, how they're going to properly manage those refrigerants and dispose of them. All right, so you got the idea. This is how we're going to do these quickly now going forward. Now that you understand the goal, we're going to do this, what I call the speed round. So which of these solutions do you think ranked highest? And Sophia will launch that next poll for us. Great. So do you think that it was rooftop solar, afforestation, offshore wind turbines, or educating girls? They're all good options, right? It's hard to choose. Okay, let's show those results. So it looks like rooftop solar and offshore wind turbines were tied, but really the number 6 solution was actually educating girls. How awesome is that, right? You might wonder how it's related. Primarily, it's through the impact on reproductive rates. Schooling can reduce family size by 4 to 5 children per woman. And educated girls also have more productive agricultural plots. Their families are better nourished. They and their children are healthier. Education was found to be the single most important factor in reducing vulnerability to natural disasters. So all of these things affect reproductive rates, but they also affect the health of the people that are there and the way that they manage their resources. The analysis in the book set a goal of ensuring universal education in low and middle income countries by 2050. It's an enormous task, but the United Nations estimated that $39 billion would be needed annually to close that gap. The return on investment in this one is incalculable. So this is primarily not a local problem. So people again might ask sort of, what can I do about this? But we included it given its scale and also the opportunity to be involved in support for aid organizations, and also, generally supporting STEM for young girls here in America is also important. So the next topic is 2 sides of the same coin. Which do you think ranked higher, composting or reducing food waste before it's disposed of? Got 3 votes. Do I have one more? All right, everyone is saying reducing food waste. And that's correct. Reducing food waste came in at number 3. This is about reducing the waste in production, in the supply chain, and also in the household. It's about preventing it from getting to the point where it needs to be disposed of. although composting came in at number 60, so it is also very important. The carbon benefit is from the emissions from the food and its production, but it's actually more from the more from avoiding deforestation that would have been needed so that we had more farmland to grow the food that is not being wasted. I lost my negatives there. So instead of wasting the food, if we had wasted the food, we would have needed to deforest more land, create more intense agriculture. And as a result of not wasting the food, that then creates more sinks and is a longer term benefit to the climate. This has a 70 gigaton benefit in terms of carbon dioxide. Whoops, I think I just gave you the answer on that one. So we'll do this one quickly. These are two solutions that we talk a lot about locally. One is rooftop solar, the other is electric vehicles. So which one do you think ranked higher? Okay, you can close that one out, Sophia. Electric vehicles ranked just higher by 1 in the poll, but in the book, it's actually rooftop solar that came in at number 10. They set a goal of 7% of electricity generation from rooftop solar globally by 2050. That's up from 0.4% today. But as I've said, this is around the world, the total amount of electricity production. We're here in the Sunshine State, so we can certainly do better than 7%. What's great about this one is that it's estimated to save over $3 trillion in 30 years. It also offers a lot of benefit to developing countries, including off-grid applications and rural electrification. Now, I'm also a big fan of electric vehicles. They came in at number 26. And I would be curious if you want to put in the chat box if anyone drives an electric vehicle or has solar on your rooftop. So the next one is when we talk about making people's homes more efficient, both of these are low cost, easy solutions. If they were ramped up on a global scale, which one do you think would have the biggest impact? Smart thermostats or insulation? Smart thermostats or insulation? And while you're putting in your notes, I see that we have one person with both solar at home and an electric vehicle. And then we have another with rooftop solar and 2 hybrid vehicles. This is really exciting. Okay, so let's close that poll. And the answer in the Drawdown book was insulation. That came in at number 31. It's well-founded, it's very practical, and it's cost-effective. It's a great bang for your buck, we often say. The analysis set a goal that 54% of existing residential and commercial buildings would install insulation within 30 years. I think I probably could get a commitment from more than half of you that you will add insulation in your buildings within the next few decades. That's a long time and certainly provides a really good cost benefit. The global net savings on this one was over $2 trillion. Now, smart thermostats didn't win in this little quiz, but how cool is it that a simple technology that's really only been around for about 5 years came in at number 57. It's another easy solution that can be implemented locally. All right, so let's do our next one, another home-based set of solutions. There are also a lot of low-hanging fruit. LED lighting and water savings improvements in the home. Which one do you think would have a bigger impact? They're neck and neck. All right. All right, Sophia, we can go ahead. The answer from a Drawdown perspective is LED lighting that came in at number 33. And this is just for residential. Commercial was done separately, and that analysis came in at number 44. So combined, they're a very strong solution. People think that asking people to change their light bulbs is kind of a cliche. And I share this one to make sure that you know that it is not. It's a critical step that we all can take. Their goal is that by 2050, 90% of the household lighting market would be LEDs. And I don't think that's a lot to ask for you all to commit to only buying LEDs by 2050. The prices really are low enough now that most of us can do that in the next 5 years and transition all of our lighting in our homes to then. Again, this one has a $1.7 trillion savings. Okay, this one's a little bit harder. It's a tougher behavior change. So airplane travel and meat heavy diets are often the subject of sort of environmental finger wagging or a little bit of shaming. And we want to be sure that that's not happening in these discussions because it's really not helpful. Which one do you think would be the bigger impact on this? And then we'll talk about what it all means. Increases in airplane efficiency or shifting to plant-rich diets? Okay, y'all are good at this. The answer was plant-rich diet, which came in at number 4. The food generally is a very personal and a cultural choice, right? This is not telling everyone to go vegan. Their analysis did not look at a complete shift of people's diets. Their analysis modeled 50% of the world's population going to a diet of 2,500 calories per day and reduced meat consumption. That itself could reduce 66 gigatons of carbon. It's really something that people could consider no matter what your food preferences are, what we call being a reducitarian, finding an opportunity to reduce the amount of meat consumed and increase the amount of vegetables consumed. Airplane efficiency came in at number 43, just by the way. Okay. The last one is 2 interesting strategies that are used. One would be a shift to cool and green roofs. Cool roofs are white or light colored roofs, and green roofs are planted roofs, and both of which provide a temperature benefit for the building itself. And then the other one is preserving and restoring coastal wetlands. This one's harder. Okay. The analysis found that coastal wetlands, preserving coastal wetlands came in at number 52. Coastal wetlands ecosystems sequester some of the highest levels of carbon dioxide relative to their land area. It's stored both in the plants that are above ground as well as the roots and the soil below. Often below the water itself is still maintaining that amazing carbon-rich soil. The world's mangrove soil can hold as much carbon as the world emits in 2 years. The book Drawdown proposed protecting another 57 million acres of coastal wetlands globally in order to achieve this result. Our local coastal habitats here in Sarasota County are a tremendous opportunity, both for protection and restoration. And there are countless other co-benefits to those actions. Economic resiliency, water quality, wildlife, protection against natural disasters. All of these things are benefits of protecting coastal wetlands. Green roofs came in at number 73. So again, another really strong strategy. So I've given you a little quiz. And again, I hope there was no judgment in that. Sophia, I think you can end that poll and I'll just show some different ways of thinking about the data that we've shared. It was really just meant to be a fun look at a sampling of the 100 solutions. When they're looked at together though, they show some really interesting trends. Many are surprised to see that food is actually the largest sector for potential impact overall, with 8 of the top 20 solutions being related to food. It's not the first thing you think about when you talk about solutions to climate change, but it actually has the greatest potential. If we look at what we produce, how we produce it, and then the issue of food waste and how we handle all of that, that has such a big impact. And the other sectors we want to decarbonize, but in agriculture, we actually want to recarbonize. We want to bring the carbon back home to the earth and capture it in the soil. It's really fascinating. The other big story of the book is that the hidden #1 solution is split between educating girls and family planning programs. There are key factors in what global population looks like in 2030. And it means that advancing gender equity is actually the #1 solution in the book. This slide shows the relative impact of the sectors. I expect you might be able to see your expertise or your passion, your sort of environmental passion within this somewhere, and maybe identify opportunities for innovation and savings within all of those sectors. This pie chart shows another way of looking at these diverse solutions across all sectors. I like to think of this one as sort of the rainbow of hope, that all of these are amazing solutions. They're just listed in their relative contribution to the savings, but we can't get to the whole pie unless we tackle all of them. No matter how you scored on our little quiz, I think we're all winners in this one. Any of these strategies are impactful and they'll take us in the right direction. This is another graphic that Drawdown developed just a couple months ago that I've added, and it shows you the sectors again, but it gives you different categories of strategies within them. So within electricity, the biggest opportunity is to shift production, but there's also tremendous opportunity to enhance efficiency of how we use that electricity. And then within food and agriculture, you see that addressing waste is that biggest bucket, but then protecting ecosystems and shifting how we grow agriculture are also really big opportunities. So the way that they've presented these are just new ways to think about them, to categorize the solutions. And again, all of them are really important. Even if we don't get to the scale that they have proposed, our community would benefit in so many ways from all of these strategies. So why not try, right? It's all doable. It'll usually save us money and it'll improve other environmental and social metrics, in addition to being scientifically evaluated for real climate benefit. So one of the things that we developed when Paul Hawken actually came to speak in Sarasota County was this sort of pledge sheet. And when we send you these slides today or tomorrow, we'll include a link to this pledge sheet, and it gives you an idea of what you can do locally here in Sarasota County. These were developed in partnership with the Science Environment Council and all the local environmental organizations. And it gives you an idea within each of the categories of Drawdown, what you can do in your own home, in your own community, to make a difference in these categories, because some of it really can feel a little bit global and hard to know how to make a difference. So these bring it down to the local level and provide really tangible solutions that everyone can do. So I'd love for you to take a commitment that you'll look at these, think about what we've talked about today. You'll talk to your family. You might look at this pledge sheet and pick maybe the top 5 solutions that resonate with you, and then get to work. So we have one last poll for you, and we'd love to know if you can make that commitment to make a change in your life. Which of the categories do you think you can most easily do that? Where do you think that you will make a change as a result of these discussions? Is it in the buildings? Is it in the energy you use? Is it in your food? Is it in land use, materials, transportation, or women and girls? I'm seeing a couple are committing to make a change in the food, how they handle food in their families, another in land use. I really do hope that you will find the solutions that work for you and your family. Someone's looking at transportation. They're very personal choices, but there's something that everyone can do in each of these categories. So find what works for you, take those steps, and then look at it again and find additional steps that you can take. So let's see. That is the presentation for today, but I would love to have you all ask questions or put comments in the chat box. We are a small group, so if you want to unmute, you can do that as well. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, my name's Kathy, and I'm the one who's taken the Ollie courses with Jack. And you know, I indicated that I'd bought a hybrid car. I really wanted to buy an electric car, and I was highly discouraged in Florida to get involved in an electric car, that it is not as big a priority here in Florida in terms of charging stations and making that kind of commitment. I'm hoping in another couple years, that's not the answer that I get. But I was even told for a hybrid car that the fuel prices here are so low that many people are not incentivized to even purchase a hybrid car. So that was very distressing to me. The other thing is, one of the reasons I mentioned food versus building, I live in a condo. And so some of the things that I would like to see done in condo living, and I had talked to Jack and the others with Florida Power and Light, is if we invest in solar here in condo, can those of us who have great opportunities to be able to give back to the grid? Right now, condos can't do that. So some of the answers to your question are really policy related, and being able to get Florida Power and Light. I know residents can sell back to the grid, but individual condos cannot. And, you know, we're the day after an election, and I worked very hard to try and get Margaret Good to be our congresswoman because she believes very strongly in all of these things. And that was one of the reasons she went to Tallahassee, was to develop some legislation that would improve our ability. So from a policy perspective, I think that's where many of us need to spend our time, is to get Florida
thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing those thoughts. You might remember in the beginning, I said that these are all doable with the right policies and collective action. So it can't just be us saying, oh, well, you should do this and you should do that. There really needs to be a shift in policy in order for many of these things to get to the scale they're talking about. But it can be a little disheartening for people to make those personal choices, to see the policies not being put in place. And so we encourage you to make the personal choices as well, to show the momentum, to show that it's possible. So the point about electric vehicles, I will say that we do not have as many charging stations as some of the other states, but there's a movement to increase that. The state just granted level 3 high level charging station funding for each part of the major interstate corridors. So people will do that.
Okay.
It's been awarded, and those charging stations are being installed currently. And they're going to have another round of funding, and these are related to the Volkswagen settlement funds. So they're channeling those in order to increase charging station availability. And we in Sarasota County already have over 30 charging ports that we own and provide to the community for free. And there are many other organizations that do that as well. So there is infrastructure, and what's encouraging actually is that most electric vehicle owners charge at home overnight, and you really only need the charging stations for long road trips or sort of days when you're away from home for a long time. So that's why they're focusing on those corridors. And then condominiums and solar are an opportunity, but also a challenge. I've worked with some condominiums that have looked at solar on their commonly owned buildings. And in that case, it can be done, and it brings down the costs of operation for the whole membership. So you can, your community center, your pool, all of those things would decrease their electricity costs by having solar on those commonly shared areas. It gets a little more complicated when people want to do it just for their own condo because of the shared roofs and all of that. So I would encourage you to keep working on that, but it is a little bit challenging with those shared resources of a condominium association. Is there anyone else that wanted to share or ask a question?
I guess if nobody else wants to ask, the other comment I make is, if you take your grid of all these opportunities, it's what a lot of us have been talking about as the great job opportunities and job creation opportunities we have, anywhere from retrofitting these older buildings to the whole wind and solar and green roof installation. There are a lot of people in the world that would benefit from being trained to make these initiatives a reality. Absolutely. And again, I'm the public health person, and to me, a lot of those things are public health focused.
Absolutely, and they have air quality benefits as well. So the benefits to vulnerable communities for respiratory disease are actually more immediate than the benefits from a climate perspective. So the and I went on the public health bent, and now I've forgotten what your original point was. I apologize.
Well, it's job creation in general. And I think the wind and solar and training, and we have enough trouble around here getting people to be electricians and plumbers, let alone the people who want to build the wind farms and the other. We need to talk about that.
We do. And what's great about a lot of these opportunities is they can't be outsourced to another country. They're local jobs. They have to
Right.
be a local person to do the efficiency retrofits in your home, to put the solar on your roof. So these are going to be your neighbors who are getting these green jobs. It can't be outsourced like manufacturing can. So there's so much opportunity for economic development, green economic development with these solutions.
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Well, I hope this was useful in helping you frame this issue a little bit and think about ways to discuss it with people, because it sounds like a lot of you are very informed and already engaged, but you might now have the opportunity to talk with others in your family and friends, maybe in your neighborhood, about these issues in a new way, and find the things that connect with them and talk then about those solutions that relate to the topics that they're most interested in. Because one of my favorite climate scientists is Katherine Hayhoe, and she says the most important thing you can do to protect the climate is to talk about climate change. So find opportunities to talk to your neighbors, make the issue something that people shouldn't be afraid of. Don't make it something that is divisive. It's something that we can all work on together and find things that really resonate with all of us.
Lee, did the young people here take part in those Climate Fridays or whatever the demonstration? Did they do that here?
They
do
did.
They still do
it's
that?
Called Sarasota Students for Climate. They have a Facebook page, and they did do Friday protests, but they also have done very effective campaigns to influence public officials, including county commissioners. So they have contacted the county commissioners for many weeks and gotten a meeting with the county administration, and we look forward to engaging with them going forward. These are high school students, really very well organized and making a difference. It was nice to talk with you all. Thank you for joining us. Yep. Have a good day, everyone. Thank you.